Marriage is the worst contract you'll ever sign, worse than a bad business deal, worse than debt, worse than most decisions that'll ruin your life. And I learned this the expensive way, 3 times. I've been married 3 times, divorced 3 times, and every single time, I thought I'd figured it out. I thought this time would be different. This time I'd found the right person. This time I'd learned from my mistakes. I was wrong, all 3 times. And at some point, you have to stop blaming circumstances and start recognizing patterns. The pattern is this: marriage, as an institution, is fundamentally incompatible with the life I live. Not because I'm special, not because I'm some damaged person who can't commit, because the expectations of marriage conflict with the reality of building things that matter, and nobody tells you this until you've already signed the papers and handed over half your net worth. Let me be clear about what marriage actually is. It's a contract. A legal agreement where you promise to merge your life with someone else's, share resources, share decisions, share time. And in theory, that sounds beautiful. 2 people building a life together. In practice, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Especially if you're trying to do anything significant with your time on this planet. Here's what nobody tells you. Marriage requires maintenance, constant attention, emotional energy, time, lots of time, date nights, conversations, compromise, all the things normal couples do to keep the relationship healthy. And if you're working 18-hour days, trying to make humanity multiplanetary, or transition the world to sustainable energy, you don't have that time. You physically don't have it. Something has to give. And what gives is the marriage. Because you can't pause building a rocket company to go on vacation. You can't delay a product launch because your spouse needs attention. You can't split your focus when thousands of people are depending on you to make the right decisions. So, the marriage suffers. Then it dies. Then you're in divorce court wondering what went wrong. What went wrong is you tried to do 2 incompatible things at once. My first marriage, I was young. Still building my career. I thought I could balance it. I couldn't. The work consumed me. I was obsessed with making Zip2 succeed, then X.com, then PayPal. My wife at the time wanted a husband who came home at 6 and asked about her day. I was the guy sleeping in the office and waking up thinking about code. That's not sustainable. That's not a marriage. That's 2 people occupying the same legal agreement while living completely different lives. We divorced. I thought, okay, I learned. Next time I'll find someone who understands the work. Second marriage, same pattern, different person, same outcome. Because the problem wasn't the person. The problem was the institution. Marriage expects you to prioritize the relationship. But when you're building something that could change the trajectory of human civilization, the relationship can't be the priority. It just can't. And pretending otherwise is a lie that leads to resentment on both sides. Third marriage, same woman as the second, we tried again. We thought maybe we'd matured, maybe we'd figured it out. We hadn't, because the fundamental incompatibility didn't change. I'm still the person who will work through the night if that's what it takes. I'm still the person who thinks about Mars when I wake up. I'm still the person who can't turn it off. And marriage wants you to turn it off, to be present, to prioritize the partnership over everything else. I can't do that. I won't do that. So the marriage failed. Again. Here's the part that really bothers me. Society acts like there's something wrong with you if you can't make marriage work. You're not trying hard enough. You're too selfish. You need to compromise more. But nobody says, maybe marriage is an outdated institution designed for a world that doesn't exist anymore. Nobody questions whether the contract itself makes sense. Marriage made sense when people lived in small communities, had clearly defined roles, and expected to die by 50. The man worked, the woman raised kids, and managed the household. Everyone knew their job. It was a practical arrangement. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world where both people have careers, roles are fluid, and you might live to 90. The old contract doesn't fit the new reality, but we keep pretending it does. And the financial side is even worse. When you get married, you're essentially agreeing that if it doesn't work out, you'll split everything 50-50. Doesn't matter who earned it. Doesn't matter who built it. Doesn't matter whose name is on the company. Half goes to the other person. That's the deal. And you sign it willingly because you're in love, and you think it'll last forever. It won't. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Those are terrible odds. My divorces cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. Not exaggerating. Hundreds of millions. Money I could have put into SpaceX. Money I could have used to accelerate the mission. Money that's now gone because I signed a contract that said love conquers all and forever is real. Except love doesn't conquer all, and forever is a lie we tell ourselves to justify bad decisions. But you know what? The money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the time, the emotional energy, the years spent trying to make something work that was never going to work, the distraction from the mission. I've got maybe 30 or 40 productive years left if I'm lucky. Every year I spent fighting in divorce court or trying to salvage a failing marriage is a year I didn't spend getting us to Mars. That's the real cost, and it's not recoverable. Let me tell you what happens in a divorce when you're wealthy. You hire lawyers. Lots of them. They're expensive. They bill by the hour. And they have zero incentive to resolve things quickly because the longer it drags on, the more they make. So what should take 3 months takes 2 years. What should be a simple asset split becomes a war of attrition, and you're stuck in it because walking away means losing even more. Then there's the public element. When you're a public figure, your divorce becomes entertainment. People you've never met have opinions about your marriage. The media writes stories speculating about what went wrong. Your mistakes become headlines. Your private pain becomes content. It's humiliating. And there's nothing you can do about it except wait for the next news cycle to move on. I'm not saying my ex-wives were bad people. They weren't. They're smart, capable women who deserve better than what I could give them. That's the point. The problem wasn't them. The problem was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Trying to make marriage work when the life I'm living is fundamentally incompatible with what marriage requires. Here's what marriage needs to survive: time, attention, presence, compromise, shared priorities. Here's what building revolutionary companies needs: time, attention, presence, uncompromising focus, singular priority. You see the problem? They're competing for the same resources. And if you're serious about the work wins. Every time. Which means the marriage loses. Every time. So, after 3 attempts, I finally accepted reality. I'm never getting married again, not because I'm bitter, not because I hate the institution, because I'm done pretending I can be 2 people at once. I'm done pretending I can give a marriage what it needs while also doing what I'm here to do. I'm done lying to myself and to someone else about what's possible. And you know what's interesting? Once I made that decision, once I stopped trying to force myself into the marriage box, I felt relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for 20 years and finally exhaled. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to feel guilty about working late. I don't have to justify why the mission matters more than date night. I can just be who I am, and who I am is someone who probably shouldn't be married. Now, people will say, but what about companionship? What about not dying alone? Fair questions. And here's my answer. Companionship doesn't require marriage. You can have meaningful relationships without signing a contract. You can have people in your life you care about without merging bank accounts and promising forever. Marriage is one model for human connection. It's not the only model, and for some of us, it's the wrong model. As for dying alone, we all die alone. Doesn't matter if you're married or not. In that final moment, it's just you. And I'd rather die alone having done something meaningful than die next to someone while living a compromised life. That might sound harsh, but it's honest, and honesty is all I have left after 3 divorces. Let me talk about kids for a second, because people assume you need marriage to have kids. You don't. I have multiple children. I'm involved in their lives. I provide for them. I love them. And I did all that without staying in marriages that weren't working. Kids need parents who are present and engaged. They don't need parents who are miserable and pretending. Staying in a bad marriage for the kids is one of the dumbest things people do. Kids can sense when their parents are unhappy. It damages them more than divorce does. So if your goal is kids, you don't need marriage. If your goal is companionship, you don't need marriage. If your goal is love, you definitely don't need marriage. The only thing marriage gives you is a legal structure and social approval. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't need either. The legal structure costs me money. The social approval doesn't matter, so why would I do it again? Here's the advice nobody wants to hear. If you're thinking about getting married, ask yourself honestly, what does this contract give me that I can't get without it? If the answer is social acceptance, or tradition, or it's what people do, don't do it. Those are terrible reasons to sign a legal agreement that could cost you half your net worth. If the answer is, I want to build a life with this person, and we need the legal structure for practical reasons, like taxes, or healthcare, or custody. Okay, that's at least rational. But understand what you're signing up for. You're making a bet that this person will be compatible with you for decades, that neither of you will change in fundamental ways, that life won't throw you curveballs that tear you apart. Those are long odds. Bet accordingly. And if you're someone like me, someone whose work is their identity, someone who can't turn it off, someone who's trying to do something that requires total commitment, my advice is simpler. Don't get married. Just don't. Save yourself the time, the money, the emotional devastation, and the distraction. You can have relationships. You can have kids. You can have love. You don't need the contract, and the contract will eventually destroy all those other things anyway. I think about the version of me that never got married, the one who just focused on the work from day one. That version of me would be years ahead of where I am now. Not because marriage made me less productive, though it did. Because divorce made me less productive. The fighting, the lawyers, the emotional drain, the public spectacle, all of that is time and energy I can never get back. And for what? For the privilege of saying I tried to make it work? That's an expensive privilege. Here's something else nobody talks about. Marriage changes the power dynamic in your life. When you're single, your decisions are yours. You want to move to another city? Move. You want to start a risky company? Start it. You want to work 100 hours a week? Do it. When you're married, every decision is a negotiation, and negotiations take time. They require compromise, and compromise, in the context of trying to do something unprecedented, is how you end up doing nothing. I'm not saying compromise is bad in all contexts. In a normal life, with normal ambitions, compromise is how relationships work. But if your goal is to change the world, compromise is death. You need to be able to move fast, take risks, make decisions, without committee approval. Marriage is a committee of two, and committees are where good ideas go to die. Let me give you a specific example. When SpaceX was failing in 2008, when we were on the verge of bankruptcy, I had to make brutal decisions. Cut costs, lay people off, risk everything on one more launch. Those decisions required speed and clarity. If I'd had to negotiate every decision with a spouse, if I'd had to consider how it affected our family finances, our stability, our future together, I would have been slower. And slower would have meant failure. SpaceX would be dead, Tesla would be dead, I'd be known as the guy who tried and failed. Instead, I'm the guy who bet everything and won. Because I could move without asking permission. That's what being unmarried gives you. Freedom to fail. Freedom to risk it all. Freedom to make decisions that look insane to everyone else because you don't have to protect anyone but yourself. That freedom is worth more than companionship. It's worth more than social approval. It's worth more than not dying alone. Because that freedom is what lets you attempt the impossible. And attempting the impossible is the only thing worth doing. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Elon, you're just rationalizing. You're making excuses for failed relationships. You're pretending your workaholism is noble, when really, you're just bad at relationships. Maybe there's some truth to that. But here's the thing. Even if I'm bad at relationships, even if I'm using the mission as an excuse, the outcome is the same. Marriage doesn't work for me. And doing it again would be insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing 3 times and expecting different results. I'm not insane. I'm done. And honestly, I think a lot of people stay married not because it's working, but because they're scared of being alone. They're scared of what people will think. They're scared of starting over. So they stay in relationships that are dead. They stay in marriages where they're going through the motions. They stay because leaving feels harder than staying. That's not love. That's fear. And fear is a terrible reason to stay in a contract that's making you miserable. I'd rather be alone and building rockets than married and building resentment. I'd rather die on Mars, unmarried and focused, than die in a suburb somewhere, married, and wondering what I could have accomplished if I hadn't spent so much energy on a relationship that was always going to fail. That's not romantic. That's not what people want to hear. But it's the truth. And truth is more valuable than comfort. Here's my prediction. In 50 years, people will look back at traditional marriage the way we look back at arranged marriages now. As an outdated practice that made sense in its time but doesn't fit the modern world. People will still have relationships, they'll still have kids, they'll still build lives together. But the legal contract, the till death do us part promise, the expectation that one relationship should meet all your needs for 50 years, that'll seem absurd. Future generations will wonder why we clung to it for so long. And maybe I'm just ahead of the curve. Maybe I'm the test case for what relationships look like when you strip away the institution and just focus on what works. Multiple partners over time, each serving a different chapter of your life. Kids raised by involved parents who aren't together. Companionship without ownership. Love without contracts. Maybe that's the future. Or maybe I'm just a cautionary tale about what happens when you prioritize mission over everything else. Either way, I'm never getting married again. I've paid that tuition 3 times. I've learned the lesson. The contract doesn't work for me. The institution doesn't fit my life. And I'm done pretending otherwise. If that makes me undateable, fine. If that means I die alone, fine. I've made peace with it. Because the alternative is lying to myself and to someone else about what I can give them. And I'm done lying. So to anyone reading this who's thinking about getting married, here's my advice. Really think about what you're signing up for. Not the wedding, not the romance, the actual contract. The legal agreement that says you'll merge your life with someone else's, and if it fails, you'll split everything down the middle. Ask yourself if that's a bet you want to make. Ask yourself if you're ready to compromise on everything. Ask yourself if you're okay with the possibility that in 10 years, you'll be sitting in a lawyer's office dividing up everything you built, while the person you once loved becomes a stranger you're negotiating with. If the answer is yes, if you're genuinely ready for that and you think the odds are in your favor, go for it. I hope it works out. I hope you're in the 50% that makes it. But if the answer is no, if there's any doubt, if you're doing it because it's expected or because you're scared of being alone or because you think it's what you're supposed to do, don't. Just don't. The cost is too high. The risk is too great, and there are other ways to live a meaningful life. I'm building rockets. I'm trying to make life multiplanetary. I'm trying to solve the energy crisis and connect human brains to computers. Those are my commitments. Those are the relationships that matter to me. And I don't have room for another contract that requires me to be someone I'm not. Marriage is the worst contract you'll ever sign. I signed it 3 times, and I'm never signing it again. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom. Expensive wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. And if I'm wrong, if I end up regretting this decision when I'm 80 and alone, so be it. I'd rather regret staying true to myself than regret compromising who I am for a contract that was never going to work anyway. That's my choice. And it's the first completely honest choice I've made about relationships in 20 years. I'm never getting married, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life.